arrest in his home. That is Chato. We'll be giving you details of that later on, as of course the proceedings will take place. Karibu sana. That is going to be what it is that we touch on this morning, an exclusive moment for Magufuli, as we say, may his soul rest in eternal peace. We'll be having household names, Pan-Africanists, who are going to join us to keep us up to speed, and not necessarily actually keep us up to speed, but to just, have a moment of commemoration of Magufuli, the man, his style of leadership, what is there to learn from him, a man who's been celebrated and equally castigated in equal measures. Many have come out to condole with the family, the friends, the people of Tanzania, showcasing just how much they admired his style of leadership. Many have argued that indeed, if Africa were to get a couple of leaders that are of Magufuli's nature, then it would be a different story in terms of transforming the nation. A man who could have the guts to say no to foreign eyes or foreign interference in his country. A man who kept the interest of his country at heart, always saying Tanzania first, ensuring that, he speaks of how they can make Tanzania best. And true to it, in just one term, walking into the second term, indeed, he has done wonders. The people of Tanzania say that hats off, they celebrate him. They are thankful that he was able to bring this transformation that they never imagined of. We'll be looking at that and much more today. So it's a special edition. It's a Friday. On Fridays, we always do a bit of music and we lighten up from the toughest times of the week, but then again we do it a bit different. Celebration of life. John Pombe Magufuli, may his soul rest in eternal peace. But before that, we'll be looking at what it is that is on the newspapers, and of course we keep you up to tabs in regards to the same and much more. Polite reminder is that, like I had said, we'll be having Pan-Africanists on board. Professor Kagwanja, Professor Macharia Munene, Professor PLO Lumumba will be paying their tribute to the fallen gallant son of Africa. And equally, we'll be having the Secretary General of Chama cha Mapinduzi, that is Mwanza, in Mwanza. He will be joining us later via phone to tell us what Magufuli's reign has been for them, what they will miss about him, and what is their word for the incoming president, or the president as at now, Mama Samia Suluhu Hassan. So keep it right here as we take you through from the word go all the way. Important that you interact with us. Hashtag Morning Cafe at Linda_Alela TV47KE. Once again, my name is Linda Alela. Feel free to be part of this conversation as we take it through. Like I said, the newspapers first, what has been captured on the Daily Nation and the People Daily. Here we are, and the KCPE scandal. Just what is this scandal that we look at? Well, tests are set by subject panels comprising experts from Exam Council, Education Ministry and universities. And the KCPE scandal, candidates from privileged academies are given an unfair advantage in the test after examiners broke with best practice and lifted a half of questions from 2 books and a test paper that had been sold to some private schools last month. This is a story captured on page 7, while the Ministry of Education has maintained that so much has been put towards ensuring that, cheating is not going to be experienced, and the exercise will run smoothly. And as of the time that it was ending, such was the utterance, or such was what it is that they said. But it's contrary to what these reports indicate. Credibility concerns have been raised in regards to this, a story that we'll be looking at later on as we proceed, even as the students of KCSE are set to sit for their examinations. The question is just how best then do we also try and get a scenario where such will not play out on the KCSE examinations. Again, a question of wait and see. But CS Magoha the other day saying that the Ministry of Education has put up all what it takes to ensure that such does not happen, amidst reports that even other schools had hired, university students to have them come and sit in for examinations on behalf of their respective students at a time when also very many students are missing out on their examinations because, after COVID-19, so much happened. Some of them got pregnant, some of them, decided they're not going to go back to school. So all this is what is happening right here. But what's the biggest concern is just how best do we ensure that these processes are conducted well, so that the people who are transitioning are able to get these proper spaces of transition and, importantly, get value after all. So finally, the elderly to get COVID vaccine, a story captured on page 10 after the vaccine landed into the country. People aged 58 and above are now eligible. As of around Wednesday there, we're talking of about 40,000 people who had gotten the vaccine, extending the number to around 60. And now we hope that it's going to be a different affair. Most of the people also skeptical as to whether they should trust the vaccine or not, but the Ministry of Health maintains that it is important that they take up this jab because it is instrumental and it has been proven, in as much as the AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine has also been put to question across other parts of the world. Equally, that approval of the country to get, Sputnik as also another option of vaccine is something that is still also being debated upon. Somali immigrants face deportation, move target suspected funders of terrorism. A story captured on page 8, and tough, measures and tough actually orders coming from the CS of Matters Interior. That is Fred Matiang'i, saying that Dadaab and Kakuma should be closed indefinitely. And the question is, just where will this people go to is something that we'll be discussing also later on the broadcast with PLO Lumumba, just to get to see his view or to know his view on the same and what this would mean for the integration aspect that we've been talking about, especially at a time when Kenya is grappling with Somali in terms of the maritime border issues. And so we'll be looking at that also. We get the view of this Pan-Africanists of what ramifications this would be. Like I said, it's a story captured on page 8. A different story here that is captured on page 11. 10 billion spent, but nothing to show for it. A new report by the Public Accounts Committee has put the national government and a number of its agencies on the spot in the wake of several financial crimes. Yes, we still ask ourselves just how best can we deal with matters corruption. The likes of Magufuli have been looked at as people who successfully managed to tame corruption in their respective country. Tanzania celebrating the fact that when he came on board, he was able to tame a lot of things, including the people who were ghost workers. He ruled them out, and this money was channeled towards development. Constantly, we could see videos of him, reprimanding and, trying to cut, these loopholes that have been there that actually allow most of the people to go out there and conduct heinous acts in terms of corruption. And he could call out those people leveled or mentioned on matters graft and, instantly even fire them. And so, well, just how best can we be able to do this, especially when you realize that this has been mated upon the government? Then you ask yourself whether there is some tendency of hope at all. So we'll be looking at that later on as we proceed. A different one altogether. It's a dog life for university students. It's tough right there. I remember those reports that were making rounds the other day as to how comrades are struggling to survive, especially when there is that late, awarding of help, and a majority of them, being forced to stay hungry just so they would be able to get that education. As many would say, such should not be the case, because one of the key things that is important for our country is to ensure that education, health, these sectors are well taken care of. And that means even the well-being of the people who are in these respective sectors, including our own students. And so that is something that is being discussed, being deliberated on. Honorable Babu Owino on the other side saying that they've been trying to push in Parliament to ensure that such is not going to cause lots of ramifications that probably could have easily been avoided, so that at least they can make it simple and easy and comfortable for the comrades. Ruto-Raila alliance, anything is possible. There you go. And it's quite an interesting time in terms of matters politics in the country. On the rebound, Deputy President William Ruto and ODM leader Raila Odinga have sent strong signs or signals that they would work together against their common enemy. Well, who is this common enemy? One Kenya coalition of Musalia Mudavadi, Kalonzo Musyoka, Moses Wetangula, and Gideon Moi, that officially was spoken about yesterday. And they met with President Uhuru Kenyatta. That is several times or so to speak. This story that is touched on. That is on page 4, and many arguing that it is important that we probably get to know how best we can forge the way forward as a people. While Ruto has castigated the BBI move, a move that has come up, courtesy of the handshake that was shared between President Uhuru Kenyatta and Right Honorable Raila Odinga. Well, times are changing, and that silence that exists here at this particular time, and also looking at the level of Parliament and how there's a double speak in regards to whether Parliament should amend the BBI document or not. Yet it is well enshrined in the Constitution, is something that raises eyebrows as to what really the proponents of the BBI could be after, and the other side, stating their position. The side of DP Ruto say that they are not against the document per se, but also they are not in agreement with some of the clauses that have been enshrined, and importantly they would wish that some others are incorporated, which is something that the Right Honorable Raila Odinga and President Uhuru Kenyatta have long said it is not possible. So, well, we wait to see whether these two gentlemen would work together, and if they work together, then what would this mean politically for the nation, for their own supporters, for the likes of President Uhuru Kenyatta, who worked closely with the two gentlemen, in such a short span, is something that we wait to see even as it unravels. And there we go. Let's look at what it is that the People Daily details. Here we are. 5 counties face COVID lockdown, and a story captured on page 6 and 7. Some of the proposed corona containment measures include that aspect of curfew, which is still there, revising the national curfew hours though to start from around 9 p.m. going all the way to 4 a.m. Offices restricting the number of people working in state offices and at any other given time, and also generally across different sectors. On the aspect of bars, change closure of bars, restaurants and entertainment joints to around 8 p.m. And the aspect of transport, strict enforcement of health guidelines in the transport sector, which is something, or one of the sectors that have hugely gone against the restrictions. You get much into a matatu, sadly enough, there's no that aspect of social distancing. They seem not to care, while they said it would have been wise for people to be paying their bus fares, via, phone. It is a different thing. Most of the matatu touts would ask for, cash, as opposed to you paying via phone, and so much so. So the numbers have gone up, quite alarming, or so to speak. And the Ministry of Health says, you know what, you need to stay woke because the situation is dire. We are on that phase, that is the third phase, and that is to technically tell you that we are not well placed. So if we do not strictly adhere to these containment measures, then I'm afraid we might also land ourselves into trouble, and it will be even worse for us. So how about we try and be respectful for a moment, trying to see whether we can be able to do this, even as the jab is continuously being disseminated to respective individuals, including those ones that are on the front line, those ones that are actually always out here and hugely and highly are exposed. Ruto, I am ready to work with Right Honorable Raila Odinga. But did he just say that? Well, the two politicians who are sworn arch rivals appear to open windows of cooperation ahead of 2022. He says that, he has worked with this gentleman before, and he is willing to work with anyone who wishes to see to it that, the country is taken forward, and such is his interest. Just how possible is this, or how possible is it for us to see this coalition? Well, he says, some people think I have problems with Raila. I do not. These differences are simply political. Well, Sifuna, ODM Secretary General, says ODM is working on a broader, better and bolder alliance that will shake the country and shape politics. Well, just how instrumental will this be for the common mwananchi? Wanjiko keeps asking, where am I in this equation? We can only wait and see. A story captured on page 44. Page 4. Where did I get that one? You can always grab a copy and get to see what plays out in regards to these. Members of Parliament seek to stop mistresses from blocking burials. An interesting one. Well, that is a story that has been detailed on page 12. And Kaluma proposes women who have children with a married man should only benefit from his property if they are recognized as wives. What will this be like? Is something that we wait to see, whether it is fair or unfair. Man, it is something that we can only wait to see whether this will sail through. The other day, remember, we had a story that was really interesting, that a woman who had stayed with a man for about 11 years there, they had had about 4 children, officially said that it wasn't official. This is not my husband. That is after he was trying, or he sought to, she actually sought, to, strengthen her marriage ties with a tycoon that she met later on. Well, it's going to be an interesting moment to watch, and therefore we'll be having our reporters, Elizabeth Mutuku, in Parliament following out the proceedings, just to keep us up to speed as to what these members of Parliament will deliberate. Magufuli's body arrives in Chato home for burial. Loved Tanzanian leader will be laid to rest today at his birthplace in northwestern Geita province. Like I said, we'll be following up on this, and it's a special edition of the same. We'll be having Pan-Africanists on board to help us, decipher on the style of leadership of Magufuli. What does it mean? What can Africa learn? What can the global fraternity learn? What can the leaders of Africa learn out of his style? And as they would say, there's so much to actually pick out of his leadership. You have seen the kind of allation, you've seen the kind of cries, you've seen the numerous people that have gotten out there just to give him a decent send-off. May his soul rest in eternal peace. Make sure that you keep it right here, and you can as well drop your comments. Tell us what it is that you would remember about this fallen gallant son of Africa, even as we get to bid him farewell. Of course, members of Parliament failed to agree on a position after Uhuru Wednesday's meeting. Members of Parliament from the Coast region yesterday called over a press conference after they failed to agree on what position to take on Wednesday's meeting between President Uhuru Kenyatta and 3 governors. Yes, President Uhuru Kenyatta trying to bring them into the equation as they seek to set up more coalitions, but also the Coastarians are adamant that it is now time that they set up their own coalition, or not really a coalition, they just have a regional party that will probably allow them also that chance to be part and parcel of the table, or on the table. They do not want to be on the menu anymore. Just how possible is this? How formidable will that outfit be towards ensuring that also the coast region is listened to, is given an equal position, or is even an equal hearing when it comes to matters politics at the national level? We can only wait and see. That's more like it on the papers. And I mean, let's briefly look at what it is that the roads are telling us this Friday morning. In most cases, Fridays are not so bad. So let's see whether there's something that we'd love to keep you posted on, and I'll gladly do that. Just from afar, you can tell that there's a red here. This is Mombasa Road. I always say Mombasa Road, when it comes to traffic, it doesn't disappoint, in the sense that there is always traffic. So here we are from this point of the notorious spots, Imara Daima. You will definitely always find traffic when you are taking Mombasa Road at those sides of Cabanas and all the way coming as you're getting into the city. Now, actually, on this side, you realize that it's to and from town. There's some roadworks happening right here. Maybe that's what is informing this, as you can see. And yes, that is to tell you, if you're taking Mombasa Road, you know that it's not going to be an easy ride for you this morning. So make sure, if you are to step out as early as now before it becomes worse. And this going down all the way as you try and find your way to the city around Capital, not looking so bad today. And going down all the way to where you get close to the roundabout. Evidently, there's some tenders, some bit of traffic, but it's not as bad as it's always and what it is that you'd expect. On this other hand, or this other side, the southern bypass doesn't look as bad. This is the southern bypass. It's pretty much of a smooth ride this morning on the southern bypass. On this other side, let's see what Langata Road looks like. And evidently there's no cause for alarm. That is along Langata Road, and going all the way as you get to connect to the southern bypass, and through as you get to connect to the Nyayo National Stadium. Down there as you try to find yourself into the city, Langata Road is looking all rosy. Bunyala Road is here, equally not so bad this morning. And on the other side, you'll definitely see the size of Baricho Road. That's really nothing much to worry about. Let's see whether there's something else or somewhere else that we should be worried about. Thika Road, again, is also that one that does not disappoint, especially an area around Pangani. As you know, vehicles try to get themselves into the city. It doesn't look as bad because you realize that this side of Utali, there's not much of traffic. Traffic begins at around Muthaiga. They are going down. Evidently, it's because there are different roads that are connecting, trying to get into the city. From Muthaiga Road, Kiambu Road, from Muranga Road, you realize that that's what could be informing this traffic here. So yes, this is what you expect, and in most cases or most mornings you will find that. But going down to this other sides from Githurai, Thika Road is pretty much of unease this morning, so you need not to worry if taking that direction. And let's see whether there's another place that we probably need to look at. The likes of Mirema doesn't look bad. Kamiti Road doesn't look bad this morning. Let's see, the northern bypass is evidently clear, as you can see right from the top. These sides of Garden Estate, Maruroi Road, evidently good. This is within different estates. Dome, it is pretty much of an ease this morning. Anywhere else that we probably need to see, let's see. And these sides of Limuru Road, the sides of Runda, that is down to the northern bypass, evidently not looking bad. This is Limuru Road down here. It's pretty much of an ease this morning on these sides of Gigiri and going down to Muthaiga, these sides of Peponi, Kitusuru. It is pretty much easy this morning. Let's look at what Waiyaki Way would be like, and Waiyaki Way is evidently also not bad as you come to connect to these sides these sides of James Gishuru, and James Gishuru is here, not looking so bad. Gitanga Road is equally down here, looking much of an ease. Ngong Road, as you can tell, is not bad this morning. So evidently it's a typical Friday where you do not find much of traffic that would worry you if you are stepping out. So like I said, it's a special day. It's tribute to fallen soldier, that is John Pombe Magufuli, and we'll be looking at that extensively. Like I said, we'll be having Pan-Africanists who will join us. Yes, we'll have Professor Kagwanja, Professor Macharia Munene, Professor PLO Lumumba. We'll also have the Secretary General of Chama cha Mapinduzi down in Mwanza, and he will be joining us via phone to keep us up to speed in regards to this. All right here, make sure that you are part and parcel of this conversation. The hashtag, as always, is Morning Cafe at Linda_Alela at TV47KE. I'd love to hear from you, even as we bid fare thee well to John Pombe Magufuli. Let's come back with more after this break.
So if you come across any disease like yellowing of leaves, rust,
kama kuna maji mingi utakuta inamea lakini haitoi ile garlic inafaa itoi, that standard garlic.
We did onion farming. Today we meet Onion's sister, Miss Garlic. Join us this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. as we talk more about garlic farming.
So if you come across any disease like yellowing of leaves, rust,
kama kuna maji mingi utakuta inamea lakini haitoi ile garlic inafaa itoi, that standard garlic.
We did onion farming. Today
Now, welcome back. Let's briefly look at the news stories of the day. And President Uhuru Kenyatta is set to address the nation today amid a health crisis as the COVID-19 infections hit the roof. And with the rising numbers, section of Kenyans have asked Kenyatta to consider a second lockdown to reduce the rate of infections, as Musa Salah now reports.
Kenya's COVID-19 infection rate has been on the rise since the third wave began a few weeks ago. The country recording a daily average death of 28 people, the highest recorded ever. President Uhuru Kenyatta is expected to address the country on Friday with calls to review the anti-COVID-19 guidelines. However, some Kenyans have asked Kenyatta to consider locking down the country to reduce the infection rate, others warning that the move may cripple Kenya's already struggling economy.
Ikiwekwa lockdown itapungua kidogo. Kitambo watoto warudi shule itakuwa tayari imeshuka. Lakini ikizidi kuachwa hivi basi huenda tukaangamia zaidi. Unaona, wakati kulikuwa na lockdown, haikuwa iko juu sana. Lakini kwa hivi sasa hii corona tuko nayo saizi naona ni kama iko tofauti na ile ya kwanza. Hii ni moto sana kuliko ya kwanza. Kwa hivyo inahitaji lockdown.
So Uhuru akisema maneno ya lockdown hiyo itakuwa shida. Tutaibia wewe na wengine. Tutafanya kazi yenye haifai.
Watu wamekuwa too careless. Watu wakikuwa careful na wa take every precaution wanaambiwa kila kitu kitakuwa sawa.
In Kajiado County, village elders have begun a public sensitization program to encourage the locals to adopt and implement the Ministry of Health guidelines. The elders have also promised to work together with the police to enforce the anti-COVID-19 measures.
Na tulikuwa tunazunguka leo tukisensitize watu kuhusu kujizuia kupata coronavirus. Tumeamua wale wenye watakuwa na kichwa ngumu tutashirikiana pamoja na polisi na machief ambao tunaweza chukua hatua, sababu hii haitaki mchezo. Inatakana kila moja akue anazingatia sheria.
The elders have also asked Kenyans to take the personal initiative to keep themselves and their loved ones safe.
Kweli corona na imerudi na mama yake. Sio ni watu tumesikia hata watu vile wanakufa wakubwa wamekufa. So sisi watu kila mtu achukue jukumu lake. Yeye mwenyewe kujichunga. Mimi sitaweza kuja hapo kukuchunga kuambia kila saa jichunge na corona.
In Nyeri County, hoteliers and bar owners have faulted the Nyeri County government for introducing a new directive that requires all workers in eateries to be tested afresh for the virus to curb the new wave of COVID-19. However, the Pubs, Entertainment and Restaurants Association of Kenya, PERAC, has lauded the government's efforts in combating the virus, reaffirming its support for emergency response measures by the government.
And it has been tough, to say the least. It has been tough because you'd expect that a place like this will have, a lot of effect in terms of turnover. It's new, it's a place that people would enjoy in Nyeri or people coming from, and they still cannot come because in as much as I have tried to observe the protocols in terms of distance and all the other things that are required of me, it's still tough.
Several government officers have reduced their employees and services to reduce the spread of the virus. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has today announced its plans to suspend its services to foreign nationals effective 29th of this month. According to a statement to newsrooms, this will help reduce the infection rate in the ministry's immigration department. Musa Salah, TV 47.
Still on that, the Ministry of Health has announced the addition of people above 58 years in the first phase of the COVID-19 vaccination exercise. In a statement to newsrooms, COVID-19 Vaccine Task Force Chairperson, that is Dr. Willis Ahwale, says that the group is being prioritized due to the serious threat facing them amid the third wave of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Good news for people above the age of 58 years as the government announces the addition to the first phase of the COVID-19 vaccination exercise. In a statement to newsrooms, COVID-19 Vaccine Task Force Chairperson Dr. Willis Ahwale says the group is being prioritized due to the serious threat facing them amid the third wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Ministry of Health says in phase 1, it's prioritizing frontline workers who include those in the health health sector, teachers and staff working in institutions of learning, members of the disciplined forces, and persons aged 58 years and above. And following claims that some hospitals are taking hefty fees for ICU beds amid shortage, the Kenya Medical Practitioners Council has undertaken a survey that shows out of 5 major hospitals in Nairobi, only one hospital has 23 available ICU beds. This even as the country records a total of 1,463 new COVID-19 infections with 26 new deaths. The positivity rate is at 16.3%. Zainab Mohammed, TV47.
And out to politics, Deputy President William Ruto now says he cannot rule out working with ODM boss Raila Odinga ahead of the next year's poll. Now, the DP, in an interview, said it is only Odinga who has been championing national political outfits. Ruto further revealed that the recently formed United Democratic Alliance is his plan B if he will be chased out of the ruling party, Jubilee Party.
Deputy President William Ruto says he cannot rule out working with ODM boss Raila Odinga ahead of the next year's polls. In an interview with the local station, Ruto said he is ready and willing to work out with all like-minded politicians who share his dream for the country.
Mimi nataka nikueleze, mtu yeyote kama ako tayari kushirikiana na sisi katika harakati hii ya kufukuza umaskini na kufukuza ukosefu wa kazi kupitia kwa mpango huu ambao tuko nao, the new economic model ya Kenya, kila mtu anakaribishwa kwa sababu nia yetu ni kuunganisha wa Kenya. Kila mtu tuko tayari kushirikiana na kila mtu ambaye ako na nia hiyo.
His statements comes just a day after President Uhuru Kenyatta met coastal leaders at State House Nairobi, among them Kwale's Salim Mvurya, who has been his point man at the coast, and Raila's men at the region, Hassan Joho and Amason Kingi.
Has said that they're going to make an alliance with another national party that is most likely to shake this country. And that tells you one thing, that UDA and ODM are most likely to work together in the future. And you can see the frustrations that Raila Odinga is going through in his relationship with the president. The history of Raila Odinga is very clear. Even when he went to work with KANU, and everybody thought that Raila Odinga would never work with Kibaki. But a time came when he threw away his personal interests and looked at the country and joined with Kibaki. It's the same thing that is likely to happen, and that's actually in the formation, it's in the works.
In politics, you can never say never. Anything is possible. After all, in politics, it's just difference in ideologies. Anything is possible in this regard.
And for the first time, the second in command confirmed his links with UDA party, terming it as a plan B in case he is chased out of the Jubilee party. He says the party has been turned tribal and hijacked by his competitors.
Ya chama kupitia kwa serikali. Ni vipi tunaweza kuleta wengine wengi tuungane? Hapana. Ni vipi tunaweza kumuondoa huyu kwa fitina? Ni vile tunaweza kuendesha. So ikifika pale mahali ambapo itashindikana kwamba hawa watu wameamua, vile wewe umesema kwamba wametangaza wazi kwamba hawataki wengine wetu katika chama ya Jubilee, basi itabidi tuwe na mpango mbadala.
And with political formations popping up pre and post BBI, the deputy president termed them as tribal, saying his aim is to work with the national party.
Lakini mahali ninakubaliana na former prime minister, yeye kama vile mimi tunaamini katika chama ya kitaifa. Yeah? Wenzake wale wengine hawaamini katika chama ya kitaifa. Wao wanaamini kwenda tafuta kabila yako, tengeneza chama ya kabila yako, alafu utafute mtu mwingine ametengeneza chama ya kabila yake, alafu utafute mwingine ametengeneza chama ya kabila yake, muungane mfanye ukarabati. Mimi hapo sipo, kwa sababu mimi ninaamini na nimeona vile chama ya kitaifa inaweza kubadilisha nchi.
BBI is expected to welcome political coalitions, already political bigwigs realigning for political coalitions ahead of 2022 elections. Elizabeth Mutuku, TV47 Palm Beatings, Nairobi.
And still the Parliament precincts, our Parliament, that is Thursday, held a second reading of the Law of Succession Amendment Bill, where a majority of the members supported the Peter Kalumba proposed amendment bill. The document seeks to lock out secret lovers from interfering or inheriting property after their lovers die. And just like the first reading, the discussion on the floor of the August House was nothing short of entertaining.
The Law of Succession Amendment Bill has been received with massive enthusiasm in the August House, even in its second reading, with most of the members in support of the bill, only proposing a few amendments that they say need a proper definition, as could cause more trouble and complications in the future. Today, the clauses touching on property inheritance, where a list of dependents was issued, and the definition of a spouse, had the MPs seek in-depth definition of the two of dependents listed as beneficiaries of a deceased's wealth to be inherited, with the MPs citing that the list was too broad as many people were sowing where they did not reap.
Queens have slayed their way into family properties and reaped where they have not sown, Honorable Speaker, which is, Honorable Speaker, pathetic, Honorable Speaker, because there is no burial that have been postponed for our female colleagues, but for the male, it is a problem, Honorable Speaker, because of this issue of the slay queen.
Queen, who go after property when we also have slay kings? Can it be balanced so that we can say that we are defending the marriage institution both from slay queens and slay kings?
Apparently, it means when people want to prove that they were being maintained, I hear that they normally take photographs of maybe they were having a cup of tea together, sitting on a chair near each other. That means even a person who was a worker can claim to have been maintained and claim ownership and to claim that they should actually be maintained.
Either you are a wife or you are not.
Of our husbands and wives and our children, we need to introduce an amendment, Honorable Kaluma, that it is only in the absence of Part A, where the spouses and the children are, that your stepbrothers and stepsisters and your grandparents can inherit your estate.
Honorable Speaker, this is an open blanket to allow and create confusion and to interfere with the fundamental unit of the family, one which, Honorable Speaker, adults above 18 years get involved in with respect to what it is that it entails.
The debate Thursday morning did not fail to entertain. The MPs argued on basis of whether or not children bared out of wedlock should be included in the list of dependents.
The slave queens, some of them have made this one a business in which they will pretend that they are very hard to get, but only maintaining a certain season when, Honorable Speaker, they know that this is the season, Honorable Speaker. I don't want to go into very many details, Honorable Speaker, but you'll find that several people and several men are being claimed to be the fathers of one single child.
But where it has reached, and we have seen also many cases where very innocent women, they are cheated by irresponsible men who tell them that they would marry them. They give birth with them. It is also on this platform we want to tell our girl child and our women in this country, please, these men who are coming to tell you they love you and they keep you as mpango wa kando, they don't want to be noted by their wives or their families. Push them. Let them recognize you. And actually, where we are also suffering so much, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is because we have forgotten our traditions in this country.
It is shameful that you can stand in the honorable house of this caliber to say that men give birth carelessly all over the place, even with animals, without knowing
who their children are. We demand as women that wherever you give birth, you should keep it on record and take care of that child, because we are tired of these children we are calling fatherless when their fathers are well and kicking. It is high time that men take responsibility and do that which is right. Otherwise, all the women deserve to be respected.
The court was also mentioned as a big contributor to the birth of this bill, where the judiciary on several occasions blamed for delaying a burying of the dead, as families squared their differences and interests which dragged for years. Despite the massive support for the bill, just a few MPs opposed it, saying it did not fit the interest of their people. Ruth Mulandi, TV47.
Now, our Cabinet Subcommittee led by Interior Cabinet Secretary Fred Matiang'i held a virtual dialogue with 25 heads of missions and development partners, among them representatives of the United Nations and World Bank, over the refugee situation in Kenya ahead of the planned closure of Dadaab and Kakuma refugee camps. Now, the meetings come a day after Kenya issued a 14-day ultimatum for the closure of the camps, citing security reasons. Meanwhile, Dadaab Member of Parliament Mohamed Dahir has criticized the government's plan on closing down the camps. Dahir says claims that the camps are a security threat are unfounded and have got no basis in regards to that. Any terrorist attack on Kenyan soil has been linked to the camps.
The ministry should go back to the drawing table, should look yourself in the mirror. This statement that was made was a statement that is really abhorring. It is discriminatory, and it is not going to go anywhere. We are saying, let us look at the closure of these camps more holistically, engage the local leaders, listen to us, listen to the refugees themselves. If third countries have been taking refugees as citizens, in America, for example, you know, Ilham, the lady who is in the House, the Congress, she came to rule the camp. We are neighbors here, brother states. Sometimes it becomes very difficult to understand why we should only look them with, not looking at them as in the face of what we are saying, as African communities, as neighbors. And I think that for me, I believe that that statement was outrageous and was inappropriate.
All right, and in conforming to the guidelines set to curb COVID-19, we have our guests, one of them on standby already, who will be joining us via Skype, Professor Peter Kagwanja, who's the Chief Executive, Africa Policy Institute, and also a Pan-Africanist. Remember, we say today we speak of the transition process in Tanzania as we bid fare thee well to, that is Dr. John Pombe Magufuli. Professor, thank you so much for finding time to speak with us. Before we even get to that, the last story that we just played in regards to, Dadaab and Kakuma being closed down, and looking at the, animosity and that feeling of uncertainty and unrest that lies therein between Kenya and Somalia. What would you make of this? A wise move by the government?
Thank you very much. I think it is it's a very difficult move on the part of the government because of its commitment to international humanitarian law, that you cannot forcibly return people who are fleeing from risk or political threat. That's one position. At the same time, there are very few African countries that are having camps. Many African countries have turned camps into kind of settlements within their country. I have the case of Uganda, over the case of Djibouti and others who have more or less included refugees within their own countries, within their own population. So it's not very clear whether Kenya would want to push back refugees back to Somalia or South Sudan, or they want to turn to kind of remove the camp settlements and then allow refugees to access certain privileges or certain rights of citizenship, so to say. So in that regard, therefore, it is something that needs to be negotiated.
allow us to fix that hitch a bit, and then we'll be coming back to you. Remember, we'll have Professor Peter Kagwanja alongside Professor Macharia Munene, and also later on we'll be having Professor PLO Lumumba as we discuss this transition in Tanzania, also that aspect of, the closure of Dadaab and Kakuma, not forgetting the maritime borders issues that stand between Kenya and Somalia, sorry. And importantly, yes, we review the leadership of Magufuli, his style, and we look into details just how best this can be instrumental in, forming and shaping the leadership across Africa. So, Professor will be joining us. That was just like a tip of the iceberg, or just teasing him and reminding you of what we'll be having this morning. Remember, it's also open for you to be part and parcel of the conversation. The hashtag is Morning Cafe at Linda_Lela at TV47KA. All these details, we'd love to get to sample some of the comments that you drop there. And we'll also be, making sure that we get to sample them and expound some more on the same. It's a Friday, and while we're doing it a bit different as we commemorate John Pombe Magufuli, remember, we do not fall short of doing what it is that we always do. It is important that you're part of the conversation, and you also tell us who is this one person that you love, and you love for us to celebrate them this morning. And we'll be having a cake for them, courtesy of Valentine's Cake House. So make sure that you keep it right here. Drop that comment even as we commemorate Magufuli. You send your message of condolence. It's important that you tell us who is this person you'd want to celebrate. It's their birthday. It's probably, a special day for them, their graduation. They just cleared their examinations. It is your own birthday. Well, you go there, drop that comment, and we get to sample that, and then we'll be calling you later to tell you whether you'll be this person that you get a cake. And we'll also be mentioning that right here on live television. The hashtag Morning Cafe at Linda_Lela TV47KE, our social media platforms, that is on Facebook, TV47 220477, our SMS short code. Yes, we'd love to hear from you even as we proceed. And as I had said earlier on, we'll have these professors joining us, and also we'll be having one person who will be calling us live from Mwanza. That is the Secretary General, or the Secretary of Chama cha Mapinduzi in Mwanza. That is Mzee Peter, will be joining us to tell us what, the Tanzanians feel about the helm of Magufuli, what they will miss about him, his own personal experience with the fallen gallant son of Africa, and we get all these details as we proceed. And so, as I have said, there's still so much lined up for you, so make sure that you keep it right here, even as we fix that technical hitch that has just been witnessed there, to get a hold of these professors so that we can kickstart the conversation. This is the Home of Untold Stories. It is always a pleasure to be with you, and as we look at the memories of Magufuli, let's also have a video that speaks of what it is that Magufuli was, and the time he was born, reminding us of where he was born, reminding us of the fact that he died at what age? Age 61 indeed, reminding us of where he went to school, and just giving you a picture of the same. That I'm told Professor is on standby. Do we have Professor? Professor? Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Well, the technology sometimes can be something, got you distracted, but we had not gotten your point to the latter.
No, hello. I was saying that the closure of Dadaab and Kakuma camp is a high wire for the government, a very difficult choice. Obviously, the idea of the threat, fear of threats coming from the camp are well-founded, given the intelligence that has been coming through. But the closure of the camps also ran counter to Kenya's commitment to international humanitarian law. And at the same time, the continued existence of the camps itself is a problem, because many countries today do not have camps. Take the case of Uganda, take the same case of Djibouti. These are countries that do not have camps within themselves. And what has happened is that there is an increased integration of refugees within the local population, and therefore the systems of help of humanitarian victims of violence and political discriminations and oppression is integrated with the development of local communities. And therefore, this idea that there are refugees who are helped separately within camps and local population that is living on the sidelines of those camps, in a number of cases has been very embarrassing. Take, for example, in Turkana, where refugees are wealthier, pampered, well taken care of than the local community. So I hope that the closure of Dadaab and Kakuma camp, when it does happen, will not lead to the forcible return of refugees, but more deeper integration and a change of roles of humanitarian, assistance, moving from just providing food and shelter, but also providing other development support to local populations as well as refugees. The local population, angle is very, very important in that these are the genuine hosts of the refugees. And in many cases, refugees have destroyed their environment. They have undermined security, as Kenya is citing, and it makes it very, very difficult to deal with this cluster of people. In other words, terrorists are known to hide behind the humanitarian shield to do harm to the local population. But at the same time, there are genuine populations that are in those camps, and their future is as important as taking care of other needs, including security.
All right, well, extensively we'll look at that later on. Thank you so much, Professor, for that particular review. It's still a delicate balance to achieve, as they would say, at a point when Kenya speaks of, this being a reason for insecurity, something that has been existent for quite a while, but equally, on the other hand, people who are, in a huge way interested argue that it is misplaced and it is unfair to even argue that such could be a scenario. And so on that particular note, Professor, we'll be looping you later on. That is at around 7 a.m. alongside Professor Moshario Munene, even as we look at the transition process in Tanzania and, we commemorate Magufuli as we look forward to today, where he's going to be laid to rest. That is in Geita, Chato, his own respective home. As the Tanzanians continues to eulogize him, the Tanzanians continue to cry because of their fallen son.
So if you come across any disease like yellowing of leaves, rust,
kama kuna mali kuna maji mingi utakuta inamea lakini haitoi ile garlic inafaa itoi, that standard garlic.
We did onion farming. Today we meet Onion's sister, Miss Garlic. Join us this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. as we talk more about garlic farming.
So if you come across any disease like yellowing of leaves, rust,
kama kuna mali kuna maji mingi utakuta inamea lakini haitoi ile garlic inafaa itoi, that standard garlic.
We We did onion farming. Today we meet Onion's sister, Miss Garlic. Join us this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. as we talk more about garlic farming.
So if you come across any disease like yellowing of leaves, rust,
kama kuna mahali kuna maji mingi utakuta inamea lakini haitoi ile garlic inafaa itoi, that standard garlic.
We did onion farming. Today we meet Onion's sister, Miss Garlic. Join us this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. as we talk more about garlic farming.
so if you come across any disease like yellowing of leaves, rust,
kama kuna mahali kuna maji mingi utakuta inamea lakini haitoi ile garlic inafaa itoi, that standard garlic.
We did onion farming. Today we meet Onion's sister, Miss Garlic. Join us this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. as we talk more about garlic farming.
so if you come across any disease like yellowing of leaves, rust,
kama kuna mahali kuna maji mingi utakuta inamea lakini haitoi ile garlic inafaa itoi, that standard garlic.
We did onion farming. Today we meet Onion's sister, Miss Garlic. Join us this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. as we talk more about garlic farming.
DStv 47, the home of untold stories.
Still with me, Professor Peter Kagwanja is on standby as we look in depth at the question of Kenya-Somalia maritime borders and the issues that lie therein, what needs to be done, because what's important and what is at the core is just how best these two countries can integrate, because peace is crucial at this point. And I mean, when we talk matters Dadaab, then we know also very well that in a huge way it touches, the people of Somalia. What would it mean? How will it augur with them? Would people argue that this is coming as coming right after that, disquiet that continues to lie in regards to these maritime border issues, or as a result of the same? So we'll be looking at that as we proceed. Like I said, it's a special session as we look at the transition process in Tanzania. We commemorate Magufuli, and we also look at a day that is bright as we wish that, his soul may rest in eternal peace. But before we even get to that, first, it's important that we discuss our very own problems here. Kenya and Somalia, Professor, I'd gladly love to hear your view on the same. It is a dispute that has been in existence. It is a dispute that has been taken to the level of ICJ. It is a dispute that many argue could have easily been, solved on the table, gentleman's agreement for the sake of peace and tranquility. But such is not the case today.
Thank you. I don't think the word dispute is really the most appropriate concept we can use to refer to our common border with Somalia, which need to be determined. Let me start by observing that this is not the first border issue Kenya is having. In 2009, we successfully negotiated with Tanzania our common border, and we had to observe certain issues of common concern. For example, if Kenya insisted on the line parallel east, it meant it would have possibly gotten to the island of Pemba of Tanzania, and therefore we had to negotiate as countries and ensure that the territorial integrity of Tanzania is respected and the territorial integrity of Kenya was respected. A very amicable environment which was not even noticed by anybody. Therefore, nobody used the word dispute. We started negotiating with Somalia on the same lines because this is a demand by the international community through what we call the UNCROS. And the law of the sea requires that at this juncture we begin to demarcate our territorial waters. And for Kenya and Somalia started negotiating as we had been negotiating with Tanzania, until somebody came along and thought that Somalia would grab some land from Kenya if they used their advantage in international courts. At that juncture, the same year, I think actually the same month, that Somalia went into the International Criminal Court of Justice, citing that they want their dispute with the Kenya arbitrated. First, they had already signed a memorandum that they will start negotiating their common border. But at the same time, a Somali national called Yusuf was appointed a judge in the court. And soon he was elevated to vice president of the court and eventually into the president of the court. The most powerful individual in the history of that court, one must argue. And therefore, that automatically turned the court into a kangaroo court that is in the hands of one country that itself is rejecting all other means of negotiating. And as I must underline here, international jurisprudence or law requires that countries negotiate or get their boundaries resolved through arbitration, through mediation and negotiations, not through court processes. Because court processes are painful and they divide people. So in conclusion, one would say that Somalia first and foremost, is an aggressor. It is trying to instrumentalize or misuse international court system because it has this comparative advantage of having its national in this tribunal. Remember, the tribunal getting through this case is made of 14 judges, and one of them is the same lawyer who was a judge. So Kenya does not feel comfortable with this process. 2, does not understand why Somali went there, and 3, does not see the sustainability of any court ruling in regard to this issue, because the two countries have never talked about their common border. They have just indicated what they would like to see. They have never talked to see exactly what needs to be observed.
All right, 3 things I pick from this, and I'd probably love to ask a question on the same one. There's been lots of allegations that maybe the foreign ministry then would not be able to address this issue as would have been expected, and therefore maybe that's the reason why we have lacked this aspect of having a gentleman's agreement, unless just having a negotiation in regards to the same. If you rightfully say that Tanzania and Kenya were able to address this dispute, why has it become almost impossible, to call Somalia to the table so that this agreement can be met? And second of all, then the question would be, if that did not work out, at least escalate this to the level of the African Union. Why is it then that it has surpassed that level to go to the level of the ICJ? And lastly, when you speak about interference of, the judge at hand, that is at the ICJ, then the question would be, this conversation is being escalated even further, and the conversation is that Kenya requests that this should go even to the level of the United Nations Security Council, or the United Nations, so to speak. I know it is there, but on a special look or a special approach. Then what would it mean, knowing very well that we just scooped a seat at the United Nations Security Council, and therefore then we'd as well have some level of influence?
Thank you, Lida. Now, I think the first question is that Kenya has never ever rejected the idea of a negotiated solution to this issue, because we have done it with Tanzania. Also, to underscore that Tanzania is currently doing it with Mozambique, and Mozambique is doing it with South Africa. And both Mozambique and Tanzania are negotiating with the Comoros, the islands of the Indian Ocean coast, in order to determine this boundary. So there is a whole process going on in the Indian Ocean to determine these boundaries. The difference between these other processes and what is happening between Kenya and Somalia is that Somalia became a little bit aggressive and rejected the negotiated process in favor of a court. And why the court? Because the court has its national as its chief legal officer, and who is extremely influential. If you recall, from 1975 through the 1980s, Judge Yusuf was actually the one who was leading the Somali process. Mm-hmm. He's the sole advocate of the idea of a line moving parallel to the border rather than moving parallel east. From 1979 all the way up to 2014, Somalia had never ever disputed Kenya's claim to its waters, which are immediate to the coast. It is like a neighbor who wanted to build a house that cuts you from the shade of the view of the world. If you look at what they are calling the equidistance line, that Kenya cannot even use a binocular to see the sea beyond, because the line will have cut Kenya's face. It is very, very arbitrary, so to say. Yet it is possible for the two countries to sit down and negotiate. But something else that must be added is their oil interest, and we have their countries and companies that are mentioned in this prospecting for oil and gas, because the region they are claiming is supposed to have a lot of oil and gas. But the other thing is, if Somalia thought that it is not, it should not sit down with Kenya as it was scheduled, and as the MOU between the two countries indicate, it should possibly have approached either IGAD, the Intergovernmental Organization on Development, or would have approached the African Union. And both organizations insist on a mediated or a negotiated solution. Why? Because it's more durable. it is more sustainable. The international, like now, if the International Court of Justice made a ruling, Kenya will just say no. It has happened between China and Philistines, or rather Philippines, where the court ruled in favor of Philippines, and China said no. So Philippines and China had to sit down after the court ruling and come up with an acceptable mediation. So I think Somalia is just being aggressive, and this is not the first time Somalia is aggressive about Kenya's back. We fought a war between 1963 and 1967 called the Shita War, all the way up to Tanarive. It was not necessary. So, in short, I think it is possible for Somalia to withdraw from its case from the court, come to the negotiation table, and settle with its neighbor on a more permanent and sustainable basis.
All right, so I think we can only wait to see whether this will play out. I can see we already have Professor Macharia Munene on standby, and so later on we'll be looping him in. You have not spoken about the United Nations Security Council aspect. Do you suppose then that I mean, are there any hopes that Somalia would probably get to a level whereby they will soften their stand, looking at the political interests of their leaders too? People argue that Farmajo is playing this one because of the aspect of, getting himself back to power and all that.
The UN's angle is not a possibility. Okay. It's not a scenario that should come into a picture. Why? Because the court itself is supposed to be part and parcel of the United Nations architecture. Mm-hmm. The court is supposed to be the final port of call for countries that are not agreeing, and the disagreements are escalating to war. And the Security Council deals with things that are a threat to international security. I don't think a maritime disagreement is a threat to. It's just like recommending that a land dispute somewhere at the heart of Ikolomani or Murang'a ultimately need to go to the Supreme Court. It's a waste of time and resources. Mm-hmm. I don't think the Kenya-Somali dispute has reached that level. But as you have indicated, President Farmajo in Somalia has turned this issue into a political issue. He wants to whip raw emotions of Somali citizens so that they can vote him as a champion of Somali nationalism, as the grand soldier who is to restore Somali's glory. I think that's very unfair and populist.
All right. Well, Professor, thank you so much for that. And I know we've had Professor Macharia Munene before. He's weighed in on this, but I'd love for him to equally tell us some more in regards to that, whether there's something that he would consider as a development of the same, whether, as you rightfully put it, maybe it will be necessary for Somalia to soften their stand on this one, and especially coming at a time when, there's that declaration from the Ministry of Interior that there's so much insecurity that culminates from the level of Dadaab and Kakuma, knowing very well that this one or this refugee camps equally house Somalia, citizens, something that would probably not augur well with them and would be looked at, as something that comes as a result of the dispute that is witnessed. Indeed, so much animosity, in as much as we would look at it as a simple or a mere, maritime border issue, there is so much that comes out of this and is likely to cause insecurity between these two countries and the African, continent at large. Professor.
Thank you. The discussion on Somalia and Kenya over the sea is really not a Kenya-Somali issue.
Yeah.
It is deeper than that.
Right.
Because Somalia is simply a proxy of some external forces that want to grab Kenya's maritime wealth, and they're using Somalia as the instrument for that. That's what the issue is.
Right.
As for Mr. Farmajo, as Professor Kawanja has pointed out, the man is playing politics and hopes that he's in trouble in Somalia itself. And right now in Somalia, there is no legitimate government. Because neither the parliament nor the presidency has been elected. The elections are voted. So what you have there interim caretakers before they can organize themselves and maybe have a legitimate government that can talk about national situation better than it is. So the temporary nature of Farmajo's position in Somalia is itself a problem that has to be dealt with by people from inside. You also note that the people in the Somali government, federal government, many of them have lived in Nairobi. Some of them were refugees in these places, in Dadaab and other places, and they used that position in those days to get passports and other things to go to some other countries. Some of them become citizens of European countries or Western countries, and therefore they are simply doing the orders of the new countries. And to that extent, when you look at what happened in 2014, when Somalia supposedly went to ICJ, it did not go to ICJ. It was the British and the Norwegians who went to ICJ through Somalia.
All right.
And you look at the people play at the time, and you could tell this is so is affiliated to this. And at that time, you know, they had just the government of Somalia had given a large exploration rights near the Kenya border, Somali border, and they pumped in a lot of money. The Ministry of Petroleum and Mineral Resources in Somalia was broke, and so these countries were paying for this.
So it would be a wild dream to even imagine that Somalia would get to a point where, you know, it would say, well, let's hold this as brothers.
It is in its interest to do that, and I think there are sentiments within Somalia that would like to deal with that in that way, because it makes sense that way. But those underlying forces that want to control not just Somalia, which they are controlling, but beyond that, there is an attempt to grab wealth at sea, the oil, the gas, and the fish. And that region is said to be very rich in terms of fish, in terms of oil, in terms of gas that needs to be exploited. So there is a competition for that wealth. Who is going to grab it from the Africans? So that's why it is an extra-continental issue. And we note that in Somalia right now there are a lot of foreign forces operating in different capacities. So we know they are training people there. We know that they have done doing a lot of things. Some of them are connected with the Al-Shabaab, which sometimes you ask how the Al-Shabaab gets its own weapons. Very sophisticated weapons. It's because there are forces within Somalia and outside that think that Al-Shabaab should be encouraged to continue creating havoc. The Somali government itself, at times, it appears to be beholden to Al-Shabaab and such things like. So there are issues, problems that are really external to Somalia, but playing in Somalia, and those issues represent forces that are hostile to Kenya for reasons that have got nothing to do with the sea. And the sea now becomes an excuse for punishing Kenya for not behaving like a good client state. And so that's what's going on.
Right. Yes. Okay, well, we can only wait and see. You have not weighed in on the Dadaab and Kakuma closure as we close this one and come to Tanzania.
Well, it's not the first time that Kenya has said this. No, it's
attempted this.
No, it is not the first time. Okay. Back in about 2006, 2007, when Raphael Tuju was minister for foreign affairs, he did raise the issue. Right. And every time the reason given is that there is insecurity emanating from the camp. At that time, Tuju said, look, we have evidence of this and this. Yeah. Now, these camps, particularly Dadaab, what may have happened is a very skillful way for Somali irredentists. Okay? Now, the Somali irredentists, those who try to grab Kenyan territory through the Shifta War, which flopped. And then they went into war with Ethiopia, trying to grab some of that, which flopped. Yeah. And after that flopped, the Greater Somali ideology collapsed. It melted. And that's why you had the whole country collapsed, went fragmented too. And the leader of the time responsible for some of that mess, Siad Barre, became a refugee in Nairobi, disappeared. And at that time, in fact, the DAB was established at that time.
Yeah.
And shortly there, a year later, then you have Kakuma also established. About the same time, when the chaos was breaking out in those areas, that's when Kenya, in its own humanitarian way,
right, because
many countries have refused to host refugees, Kenya opened up and said, we have to help. So they helped, opening up these camps, Dadaab in 1991, and Kakuma in 1992, and in the hope that it was a temporary thing to help as they get the act together.
Yeah.
Kenya, I don't think, realized at the time that some of these people were coming to create permanent residence, which they have become. And as now permanent places, settlements with their own thriving businesses, a lot of people getting very rich, operating in Kakuma. Yeah, they're doing very well, and some of them are external to the continent, others are from Somalia. And within that environment, terrorists have found their way into. So the Dadaab.
So it is a genuine concern.
It is a real concern.
Okay.
Dadaab now becomes a hub for penetrating Kenya in different ways. And we have been accused, some of our officials have been accused of being liking simple money. So they sell things, which is very unfortunate. So these camps have become threats to Kenya as a country. They have also become a conduit for now more irredentism and enhancing irredentism. And that enhancement of irredentism can be seen now it has gone into the sea and not just the land. So previously it was irredentism on the land, now it has been transferred to go into the sea. And it is doing that with encouragement of some major European powers that have interest in that area.
All right, well, we can only wait to see what will happen after all of this, something that, like we have said, has not been received so well with many or by many. And so let's wait to see what plays out. What brings us here this morning is, one eulogizing or commemorating the fallen soldier of Africa, Dr. John Pombe Magufuli, who passed on the 17th in regards to what it is that was declared by the current president now, Mama Samia Suluhu. He was born on 29th of October 1959 in Geita region, Tanzania, died at the age of 61, is to be buried today again, that is in Geita region, Tanzania. And so, as we'll be following up on the same later on, I think it's also fair that we just have a review of the system of governance in Tanzania, importantly the transition process that probably caught many flat-footed at a point when they had just re-elected Magufuli into power. Professor Kagwanja, as we loop you in, we'd love to hear your take on the style of leadership of Magufuli and what this means, this transition, what it would take. Maybe at this point when they're mourning, there's not much that could be going on. But then again, definitely it's quite a shocker, and is going to be received differently. And the Tanzanians are trying to get themselves back into that, getting their act together and trying to understand whether Mama Suluhu will fit into the shoes of Magufuli.
Thank you. The kind of Magufuli had Tanzania is not unique in our modern times. It is described as populist. It is about Tanzania first. We had that in America when we had Donald Trump, who talked about America first and basically touched on issues that divide and unite, various entities in the country. It's one way of looking at it, that it is a reflection of the larger, phenomenon of populism that has been sweeping across the world. The second way of looking at it is the revivalism of Nyerere identity approach to politics. Nyerere was a typical nationalist and populist. He looked beyond Tanzania. This was not Tanzania first, basically Africa first, but followed that kind of populism. So what Magufuli has done is bring home. Nyerere was a Pan-Africanist. He talked about Africa first, who the liberation movement, and so. But what Magufuli has done is basically popularize Nyerere and his ideas by basically talking about Tanzania first, and that has been a source of dispute with its neighbors, particularly Kenya. Chicken back, cows, turned back, boundaries being crossed and opened, very unsavory kind of exchanges between the two countries, and a very, very deliberate effort by Kenya to appoint ambassadors to Dar es Salaam who are going to manage this kind of a relationship very, very carefully. And Ambassador Kazungu must be congratulated for really handling this situation in a very, very astute way. That said, then, what we're saying is that the legacy of Magufuli in both Tanzania and the East African community is that he initiated a state of fract. The East African community has not grown as fast as they needed to grow. We saw Magufuli coming between Kenya and Uganda, particularly in the issue of building the railway. And so to say that his legacy is a very divided legacy. He'll be remembered by Tanzanians as one of the most popular and perhaps most powerful leader after Nyerere, but he will also be remembered as one of the most divisive character in the East African terrain, particularly between Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Burundi, and Rwanda. That was really his main legacy.
Well, after being sworn in, Mama Suluhu exhibits confidence that she is the president and she's capable of handling this. She says, for those who have doubts that this woman will be able to be the president, well, then you have the president. How about we listen to her speaking of this herself, and then we come back to Professor Macharia Munene to just look at how best she'd be able to now bring us together as the East African community, as African community at large, and probably whitewash all these things that were considered as negative towards African integration.
Kuendeleza kazi yake nzuri kwa nguvu, kasi. Tutaiendeleza kwa nguvu, kasi na ari ile ile. Na hapa naomba niseme kidogo. Kwa wale ambao wana mashaka mwanamke huyu ataweza kuwa rais wa Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania, nataka niwaambie aliyesimama hapa ni rais Nataka nirudie kwamba aliyesimama hapa ni rais wa Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania ambaye maumbile yake ni mwanamke. Waheshimiwa viongozi na ndugu waombolezaji wenzangu.
Yes, later on also acknowledging the presence of the heads of states that were there, and she says, these are my brothers and we've worked with them closely. Do you suppose then she fits in and she would be able to revive this, fire that has been there, champion towards integration, something that many would probably look at as going against what it is that his former set up?
Thank you. I think she's more than capable. There is something in her, some iron steel.
Right.
She did not rise to be vice president by being soft. She has proven herself to be capable of running things. And the way she was speaking there, removing any doubt in anyone's mind as to whether she is in charge, she did very well in removing those doubts. And she's symbolic, and I think she knows her symbolism, not just being president of Tanzania in a transition period. But what she represents as a woman, as a Muslim, and you can see her attire, and you can see the message, particularly in the Islamic world. He is a woman, president who is a Muslim and solid in the.
And honestly, coming, at this point, maybe looking at the patriarchal society or perceived patriarchal society, and the tendency that there was that sometimes women are meant for the kitchen. I know there's a huge shift on that one, but we still are struggling. Look at what we are today in our country. Two-third gender rule is something that we still grapple with, and with reports that at some point in time they wished to shortchange her right before she announced the death of Magufuli. Do you suppose then that the people around her, the Tanzanians, are being genuine in saying that we welcome you, we welcome your presidency, we know that you're capable? Are they genuine?
Yes, the Tanzanian as a people are genuine.
Okay.
There may be a few top guys who have some problems of their own, which is not the Tanzanian problem, it's the problem of those top people there. And I think she's smart enough to know that.
Yeah.
So, but she has time. She has to take time to think through. Yes, she will continue with some of the policies that Magufuli had initiated, and she should. But she also has to, she's her own woman. It does not follow that simply because somebody is a vice president or deputy president, that they will automatically continue with. The record shows that that doesn't happen, because the new president has to prove to be the new president.
Right.
To be Daniel
Not necessarily
Moy,
do exactly what it
Daniel Moy here.
Okay.
In 1978.
Which he played so well for quite a while.
It took time to let people know that yes, we mourned the leader gone. But I'm in charge.
Right.
And Moy did that very skillfully. But I also think that Samia is going to do that very well, to let those who have doubts about her, they'll be shown the door. They'll go.
All right. Well, she's been considered as a calm personality in comparison to, Magufuli, who was even later named the bulldozer based on his style, on his radical approach on things. And just looking at the history of deputies, well, in the country, we still have, we're grappling, vice presidents, deputies. On numerous occasions, Professor Kagwanja have argued that they really do not always have much of a say, especially when the president is at hand or the president's work is at play. Do you suppose then that she was exposed to, the acts of Magufuli, the activities of Magufuli, to a level where she can confidently say that she's picking up a mantle, and the mantle picking it up from, a person that worked with her, or they worked together, and therefore she understands what really the dream of Magufuli was. Look at Zimbabwe after Mugabe. While Emerson Mnangagwa was the deputy and probably an ally of Mugabe, he later on said that, much as I was the ally, Mugabe was running the show alone. Look at us here. Most of the times, allies of the deputy president arguing that, the president has locked the deputy out, and therefore probably he's not even privy to so much that is happening. Do you suppose she was well abreast in regards to what Magufuli was doing and would be able to take it to the next level?
The situation of the deputy is different, a complicated one. Reason being that you are simply what you are, an assistant to the main leader. Now, the high wire that every deputy has to walk, first you have to prove to be loyal to the one who appointed you or chose you to be his deputy. Two, you have to do your work diligently, meaning whatever you are given, you do it not for yourself, but for the sake of the other. The moment you show that you have interest in succeeding the leader of the day, then you have already dug your own grave. And that is what has happened to many deputies. Look at Daniel Moy in Kenya. He behaved like he knew nothing. The people thought that he had no idea about anything, and opened every school on behalf of the president, went to every international trip on behalf of the president, received all foreign guests on behalf of the president, because his plate was full. But look at the others. You want to be to be a deputy, and at the same time you want to be a successor. That itself is a recipe for self-destruction. Mama Suluhu was wise. She did everything that she was told, followed the boss wherever he was going, and therefore was given a lot of tasks and a lot of responsibilities. And that exposed her to a whole plethora of leadership. And that's why she's confident to asserting, I am the president, because she knows what it means to be the president. She never showed any sign that she wanted to challenge Magufuli as a leader. There has never been any iota of doubt that she was loyal to the man who she deputized. And that is really what there is, that, now she's mourning Magufuli, and one remembers the death of Julius Caesar, remarks by Mark Antony, that I came here to praise Caesar, not to praise Caesar. And so Mama Suluhu is burying Magufuli, and after that, let's see who Mama Suluhu is.
All right, well, okay. Opposition is a factor that is at play as it now. The opposition party leaders are coming at a point where they said there was so much, gagging. And we have Tundu Lissu on the other side. Most of the people have asked him whether he would go back home right after this. But opposition politician Zitto Kabwe of a party called ACT Wazalendo finds hope in Mama Hassan's history of activism, and that is the work as a member of civil society. She has articulated that well. She says where she started from. The civil society, on the other hand, historically, you are an international relations expert, would probably be privy to this, has been blamed for causing instability, for wreaking havoc in Africa during the activities, or in the process of trying to disseminate the activities. Would she be able to resist the infiltration of a body that she's fond of and was once there into the country, or so to speak, negative infiltration?
Well, being a member of the civil society, she knows something about how the people in civil society behave or misbehave. And it is true that civil society in many places have been misused to destabilize the countries in which they operate. That is true.
Right.
But it's also true that people, once get into their offices, they have to be their own selves. And since she knows how they sometimes misbehave, she'll be able to look out for the misbehavior and tell them, I know. So don't try it, I know. There is a danger of civil society operators sometimes thinking they own the person they put there.
Okay.
I think it was Chief Justice William Mutunga here,
yes.
Who complained that some people in civil society imagined that they owned him because he used to be part of them.
All right.
So the same problem everywhere. Now the question of the opposition politicians in Tanzania, they need to wait, give her a chance to say what our policies are. And if they disagree, then they say clearly that they disagree and give reasons for it. It's not just to say that disagree. No. You have to give good reasons, the alternative views. And those who are in the country or those who are out, it takes time to go and help the country to build up. But there will be differences. And there should be differences.
Right.
What the call is for those differences to be dealt with in agreeable ways, not to have that hostility. The impression that politics is perpetual hostility is wrong.
Right.
Because it doesn't help. Because it should be, of course, you have garnering for power, who gets power to do what and that. But that does not mean that you should be enemies. And so the opposition players in Tanzania and the civil society, they also need to put interests of Tanzania first and give the president a chance to show her mettle. If she's wrong, they have a right to say you are wrong and give reasons.
Right, whether they have a right or not is also a question of wait and see. Almost on the same note, Professor Kagwanja, Magufuli applied authoritarian-style rule during, well, which human rights and free speech increasingly suffered, as they would say. A civil society sympathizer in Mama Samia Hassan would probably be something that would get her to a point where she'd be uncomfortable. If she's championed for the rights of the people, you can almost be sure that she would not be for the idea of let's gag them, let's not allow the media to go out and speak freely, let's not allow opposition to go out and speak freely. How is she going to strike a balance on this one, even as she probably tries to keep that sanity that was well put based on the radical style of Magufuli?
Thank you. The first thing to observe is that the death of Magufuli has ushered in a new era, that is the Magufuli succession. And therefore, it's Mama Suluhu and versus those within the CCM, and it is also CCM versus the opposition. Right. And that is inevitable politics, however we want to look at it. The challenge to Mama Suluhu is how she's going to steer CCM as the dominant party, because that's what it has been. And that's what Magufuli has managed to do, to reassert the power and authority of CCM. He himself came to power as a challenged person. And I think his main responsibility was to assert that authority of CCM in a very authoritarian manner, as you have seen, which led many people to feel that he was undermining the opposition in a very aggressive and violent way. And that has left a lot of bitterness within the opposition. And I think the challenge of the opposition is to remain sober, to accept that it is fighting a nationalist movement and a very, very ideological force that has dominated Tanzanian politics for a very, very long time and is popular. So it's not a surprise that Mama Suluhu would say that hili chama chetu. She's appealing to the power and appeal of the party that she's presiding over. And in that regard, then, for the opposition, it is remaining sober and focused. For Mama Suluhu, definitely she will have to walk away from the authoritarianism of Magufuli. I don't think from the way she is talking, she's even capable of being half Magufuli in terms of authoritarianism. One wonders whether she'll have the charisma and the power and the force to maintain the same stranglehold over the party, and at the same time, reach out to the opposition to unite Tanzania in a better way than the predecessor did. So that is the challenge.
And well, of course, his predecessor being celebrated for, being able to manage the presidency, strong-willed, dealing with corruption, his efforts to boost major infrastructure projects, industrialization into Tanzania, boosting the economy. I mean, he stood out in a huge way in such a short while, probably just one term, 5 years. Many say that he's done so much that you'd get African presidents in power for 50 years and they would not be able to achieve this. That's, numerous cases have been pointed. At some point in time, that is last year in April, he rejected about $10 billion, loan, that is $1 billion United States from China for a proposed mega project in Dar es Salaam. Well, he's saying that, or this is what he said, only a drunkard would accept these terms. He probably was awake and was on alert in regards to what it is that the foreigners were bringing on board, in terms of aid, in terms of loans, in terms of having investors coming to invest in Tanzania. Do you suppose that Mama Suluhu will be able to resist, this, bearing in mind that she has acknowledged at some point in time, Magufuli never used to travel as such, and therefore some of these assignments abroad, she is the person who used to be sent there. So by then, she probably has created this rapport with these people, and therefore, in a way, they would be able to influence his, her style.
Well, there always is influence from different quarters, and her interactions with the leaders in the other parts of the world who have a bearing on her her decisions, but there will still be her decisions, driven by a desire to serve Tanzania. Magufuli's activities were driven by a desire to serve Tanzania his way. His way may not be very the best, but it was his way. So she will also be serving Tanzania her way, not Magufuli way, her way, the best way she thinks how. Now that might mean agreeing to some terms that Magufuli will not accept, or rejecting some terms that Magufuli would have accepted, because she's dealing with a different environment. And it's true that Magufuli did deliver, particularly in trying to change the work ethics in Tanzania, to get people to be go-getters, deliver. So that one, he gets credit for it. But at the same time, he was kind of short-sighted in some things.
Yes.
And I don't think she wants to be short-sighted in the way he was.
Okay.
And that's why it's a different personality, and the issues are different. And when the same people maybe come with a similar package, she will also look at that package and see, is it good for Tanzania or not? If it is not, just get her out of this way. And she has a lot of experience being a vice president for at least 5 years. And vice president is the best training position for presidency. Anywhere, because there are no other training grounds for the presidency. So she has had 5 years of training, watching closely her boss and seeing where he's goofing, because he goofed, and where he was doing well. And then she said yes. Now that she knows all those things, and I'm sure that when Magufuli started ailing long before 2 weeks, I think she knew that the man was, things were bad. And if things were bad, then the responsibility was gradually shifting on her shoulders. That she knew. And so I think she has had time to think, but she's going to be her own woman. She's not going to be a carbon copy of Magufuli. No way.
Yes, that one cannot even be achieved.
It practically cannot be, biologically it cannot be. But even mentally, she cannot be a carbon copy of Magufuli. She has to be her own woman. And there is record, not just in Tanzania, but everywhere in the world that you check, when a vice president or deputy succeeds the president, although initially he would look like as if he was a carbon copy, once he's in that office, he asserts his own authority. And sometimes that assertion is different from what his boss was doing before, and things like that. And he also says something about women and power. He said these people having doubt as to whether he is strong or good. That's hogwash. So we have records of women, once they got into it, they turned out to be more powerful and more focused in what they were delivering than the men before them or after. I'll give you an example. Indira Gandhi in India. Of course, she was the daughter of Nehru, but that's not the issue. When she got to power on her own, she was a very forceful person and delivered what she thought she should. Margaret Thatcher, of course, is well known in England, the first woman to do that. Golda Meir. And then when you go to Latin America, you may get people like the Perons. So they sometimes come on very strongly, maybe because they also have something to prove. So they assert and they ensure that their ability is not questioned on account of gender.
Okay, well, we all are eagerly waiting to see. We've seen our own women also doing so well, and therefore that should not be the ticket to probably doubt her. And so we speak of, the coming in of foreigners, investors, and, having foreign aid for that matter. And that aspect of Magufuli, where he keeps saying, or he kept on saying that, he needs to build Tanzania. He needs to transform Tanzania. Well, that was indeed one of the main things that he was channeled to do as the president of Tanzania. I mean, it is also important to acknowledge integration importance, and also to acknowledge that aspect of working with other regions, working with other nations. And we've seen the same also happening with Trump when he came with that, slogan of America only. It probably did not augur well. It did not go far. Do you suppose that was a wrong approach? Wrong or not wrong? Has it worked for Tanzania? Should Mama Samia Suluhu proceed with the same? Yes, Professor Kagwanja.
Yes. The interesting bit about Magufuli is that you can count the trips that paid abroad.
Yes.
I'm told even in the organization Tanzania Right to be Noticed, which is the Southern Africa Development Community, or I don't think he has attended any AU meeting. And I think throughout his era, we can count the number of the East African community meetings that have taken place at the level of the heads of state. Mm-hmm. So Magufuli was not your typical Pan-Africanist. He was not your classic integrator in terms of working with his neighbors. He was simply Tanzania first. And he worked very closely with those people that advanced the interest of Tanzania the way he thought those interests were. He carried in an element of fact that their country and the neighboring Tanzania that were a threat to Tanzanian interests. So he was very clear about which interest he was serving. For example, he thought that the entrepreneurial force of the Kenyan population is a threat to Tanzania. Mm-hmm. And you would have wanted actually to contain Kenyans from becoming a dominant economic force in Tanzania, irrespective of whether they are investing in whichever area, they are coming as investors, not as invaders. That was none of his business. The issue is that he believed that the investment by Kenyans was not in Tanzania's interest, and if it was, in limited weight other than in terms of the spirit of community. That's a sharp contrast with what you find in Uganda. Yep. Ugandans invest in Kenya, and Kenyans invest in Uganda, and in both cases, you might hear mutual kind of mistrust. Like, for example, the Ugandans are flooding our market with eggs, Ugandans are bringing beans into our market. At the same time, Equity Bank, Cooperative Bank, Kenya Commercial Bank, and National Bank are all in Uganda as part of the Ugandan financial industry. So in Tanzania, one can conclude that Magufuli was not he was not part of the force of integration. At the same time, Magufuli was not your Pan-Africanist. You can compare him sharply with the President Kenyatta, who has moved out there. But at the same time, he had the spirit of the East African. Look at the way he supported Kenya during the search for the UN seat, when Kenya was beleaguered by its neighbors from the north, when Kenya was not very certain about some of its neighbors in East Africa. Magufuli came out and supported Kenya and actually got his government moving out and pushing for a Kenyan candidacy. So again, that brings another notion that he believed that when power is with Kenya, when influence is with Kenya, it serves Tanzania in a certain way than when power is with Djibouti. So he was very particular about where Tanzanian interests were, but he was not your Pan-Africanist, he was not your integrator, he was not what you would call a champion of the East African community, the way we rated Nyerere, the way we rated Tom Mboya or Oginga Odinga. So that he was a different make.
All right, well, there you go. Let's speak about the social contract, which is very crucial when it comes to negotiating, with other countries on, bilateral approaches as to different sectors and how you get to benefit each other. We've seen the coming in of China, into Africa. And something that has been celebrated and castigated in equal measures. Celebrated because they say China came in and gave Africa what it is that Africa wanted at a very opportune time, and therefore that is something worth celebrating, as opposed to others who come and they want to even infiltrate in your system of governance. They say that the Chinese will come if it is infrastructure that is getting them there. That is what they will focus on. What we do not know is of the long-term, direction that they would take. they equally say that even as they come, they tend to, have their policies being busted in and their policies being incorporated and used more than the policies of the country that they have occupied or the country they have come to. What can we do to make sure that we strengthen the social culture, documents and policies that we have, such that we'll be strong enough, say in comparison to Tanzania, where they still hold the ujamaa aspect, and it has become hard for the foreigners or the West to come in and probably just master the authority or stamp the authority there?
Well, each country is expected to look after its own interests the best way it knows how. Whether one calls it America first, Tanzania first, Kenya first, is not the issue.
Okay.
It's a question of looking after its own interests, and then you argue about the method or the strategies for doing that. So the Chinese and the Americans and the Britons and the other Europeans, they are all looking out for their own interests the best way they know how. So if they come to Kenya with some sweet-talking language about certain things,
okay,
it is up to the Kenyans to be ready for that. And those Kenyans making policy or deciding for the country should be so knowledgeable and thoroughly competent. They're raising the question of the intellectual capital that the country has in order to see through those others.
Yeah.
And when they see through those others, then they can decide what is of interest, of common interest between them and Kenya. So between Kenya and Tanzania, what is common to us? And then for Tanzanians, I expect them to look after their own interest and say, no, look, this is not good for us, and for Kenya to say this is not good for us. So we look for that common bond that makes us work together. If one side is not sure of what it is doing, then it gets cheated.
Yes.
And it has no business complaining after that, because you got
a chance.
It's your problem. Because the country then should be re-examining itself constantly as to whether it is putting its best foot forward. So when you hear that some countries were cheated by the Chinese or the Americans or the French, which they have been,
all right,
it simply means that the policy makers in those countries are not competent.
Okay.
And partly because they are not competent because they do not have the requisite intellectual capital to help them see things. Either that or they are not patriotic to their countries.
Okay.
Because sometimes bad decisions are made because some people are not patriotic, so they get bribed and they sell out.
Yes.
Or those things, they become proxies for other folks. The other way is that the people who are in charge really do not know what they are doing. And therefore they can be manipulated.
Right.
So what each country can do is to ensure that those it puts in positions of responsibility, first, understand the interest, the national interest of the country they represent thoroughly, which means that they should be very well conversant with the history and society and all those things, so that they know firsthand, this is it. If they do that, then of course they need to be patriotic, and then they need to consult widely. This idea that some people are so bright they cannot be advised, or there's something wrong with that, because on the other side, sometimes what happens when you hear people are cheated, the other side gets to know more about you than you know about yourself, and you know nothing about the other side. So you can be made to run around in a very detrimental way to the country. Yeah. So it is upon those who are in charge to re-examine themselves first, to re-examine the country and see whether there are areas that can be improved, things that can be avoided, and the country moves on. So if the country is cheated by another country, it's the fault of the policymakers in that country. Yes.
All right, well, a delicate balance for Her Excellency Mama Samia Suluhu, Professor Kagwanja, in regards to matters COVID-19. And so all eyes on her, on what she is going to do next. Will she tell the people to masks, to social distancing, to this and that, to vaccines? Or will she go against the wishes of, Magufuli and probably, or she would just probably uphold the same in respect of the fallen gallant son of Africa?
She has very few choices in this regard, because Tanzania is suffering from COVID-19's, the mismanagement of COVID-19 by Mama Suluhu's predecessor. Many people have fallen to that. We've seen big names, including for Vice President in Zanzibar, generals in the Tanzanian army or military. We've seen civilians, and we are told that Tanzanians are basically the majority in the ICUs and high-density care units of the countries in East Africa, their neighbors, whether it's Uganda or Tanzania or Kenya. Now, the reason being that that disease has been, the epidemic has been mismanaged in Tanzania. Therefore, her policy choices are very clear and stark, that she has to take an about turn and begin to teach or share with the Tanzanians the need to observe COVID-19 protocols of washing, keeping social distance, attending meetings that you must attend, and as much as possible at home and away from crowds. There is no alternative. Wash your hands and so on, and put your mask all the time unless you have to remove it for whatever reason. So that said, then her choices are clear, but she will also be riding against a wave of populism, because Magufuli used COVID-19 epidemic as a subject of how Tanzania our schools will remain open, our kiosks will remain open, our shops, our everything will remain open. Now, if she starts shutting down the economy, obviously she's going to get a backlash, because people think that, whether there is COVID-19 or not, people will continue to die of malaria and other diseases. And Magufuli basically kind of banned the idea that you can have a tariff. It is only Tanzania and North Korea which have no figures of how many people have died of this disease and how many have been, have recovered from it. What is the impact of this disease? In Tanzania, that data does not exist. Because Magufuli did not allow that. So Mama Suluhu will have to walk back and take cue of what the World Health Organization is saying, what the neighbors are doing, and that's going to be good for everyone.
All right. Well, as we close it, Professor, today Dr. John Pombe Joseph Magufuli is laid to rest, and then reality dawns. While they might argue that reality has dawned because Mama Suluhu was sworn in, she's been up and about, getting the body of Magufuli across the different parts of the country so that people can have a chance to pay the last respect. They do it today. After that, what next?
Well, first things first. Bury him. So they're going to do that today.
Yes.
And then reality will really sink in, because it's a normal thing. When we go to funerals, you see people breaking down when the casket is going down.
Right.
So it's a normal thing. 2-3 days later, maybe a week or so, they adjust to that. It takes time to adjust. So Tanzania, assume it's a big human being, it will take time to adjust to this reality. Not that there is a vacuum, there's no vacuum. But everybody will have to adjust and then watch the new team leader, how she projects herself. And usually when these things happen, the vice president who takes over always says, I will continue with the policies of the they always say the same thing.
Right.
And as they are doing that, that's a way of calming the people, assuring them that they have nothing to worry about, to fear. And once they have assured people then they start implementing their own policies, their own views of how it should be. And certainly, Mama Suluhu, people are playing with the name Suluhu. It's a solution.
Yes.
So whatever problem there may be in Tanzania, she has the Suluhu.
You're saying from Pombe to Suluhu.
Yeah, wakuna Suluhu. So she need to show that she really is the Suluhu.
Yeah.
Because of all those challenges that were suppressed or ignored when Magufuli was there. So she needs tact to do it, and she will take time, but give her about 3 months before you can start asking questions, serious questions.
Yes.
But this, for 3 months, generally will be kind of a mourning period for Tanzanians and for East Africans, and then after that we expect things to go on.
Indeed.
Yes.
Well, we wish and hope that they will pick it up as fast as possible. As they would say, time waits for no man. Professor Macharia Muneni, Foreign Relations expert, thank you so much for your time, sir. And Professor Peter Kagwanja, Chief Executive, Africa Policy Institute. Asante sana once again, Professor. It was good having you. We still have more from Professor PLO Lumumba, and equally the Secretary General for Chama cha Mapinduzi down in Mwanza will also be getting a hold of him via phone, and he will tell us what he thinks of the reign of Magufuli, what they have lost, what they seek to achieve, how do they get themselves back to equilibrium, and that's exactly what next we are getting into. Well, basi moja kwa moja tunaelekea Tanzania au katika Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania, ambapo rais au aliyekuwa rais John Pombe Magufuli anawekwa katika mapumziko yake ya milele pale Chato, na kuhusiana na hili tutazungumza na ambaye ni katibu wa Chama cha Mapinduzi mkoa wa Mwanza, Bwana Julius Peter Nasongele, ambaye atatueleza labda imekuwa kuwa vipi katika shughuli hii ya kumpumzisha rais. Bwana Julius, hujambo?
Salama, habari za leo?
Na salama, nashukuru. Mwanzo ni kupatie pole zangu na pole za TV47 kwa yaliyowapata na yaliyotupata kama Afrika kwa jumla. Tunapozungumzia hili, najua kwamba ni wengi ambao labda hawajafurahishwa na hili, na letu ni kumuombea mzee akapate kupumzishwa na akapumzishwe vema katika hali ya milele. Labda tuje kwako kwa kuuliza swali ambalo labda utatueleza imekuwa kwa vipi, ukatukumbusha au labda ukatupatia kumbukumbu zako kuhusiana na jinsi alivyotawala Rais Magufuli.
Marehemu hayati Dr. John Pombe Magufuli alikuwa rais wa Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania na mwenyekiti wa Chama cha Mapinduzi tangu alipochaguliwa kwa awamu ya 5 mwaka 2015. Ni kiongozi aliyesimamia kuwatetea wanyonge, kusimamia muhimu hasa kwenye, yalikuwepo mambo makubwa manne kama kuondoa umaskini na kupunguza tatizo la ukosefu wa ajira hasa kwa vijana, lakini pia ilikuwa kuendeleza vita dhidi ya rushwa na ubadhirifu wa mali za umma, lakini pia kuboresha huduma za jamii na kuendelea kudumisha umoja, amani, ulinzi na usalama wa maisha ya wananchi, kwa maana wa Tanzania na mali zao. Tangu ameingia mwaka 2015, kweli Mheshimiwa Magufuli ameyasimamia mambo makubwa muhimu ya kimsingi hasa aliyogusa maisha ya Watanzania na maendeleo yao. Amekuwa mstari wa mbele kuhakikisha kwamba anayasimamia kwa dhati yote ambayo yaliahidiwa kwa
asante.
15-2020.
Ndio. Labda mnafurahia kwa jambo hilo la kuweza kuzungumzia masuala ya kuhakikisha kwamba Watanzania wanapata mazuri na matunda ya urais wake, lakini wengine katika Afrika au labda tuzungumzie Afrika Mashariki wamehisi kama ambavyo walitutenga, wakati ambapo labda wengi walikuwa wanazungumzia jinsi gani Afrika inaweza ikaja pamoja na kuweza kufanya kazi pamoja. Wengi wameshuhudia kwamba labda katika hali ya uongozi wake walifanya kurejeshwa manyumbani kwao au katika nchi zao na kukosa kupata vile vyeti vya kufanya kazi Tanzania. Sijui wewe utalizungumzia vipi hilo?
Hilo kukosa kazi Tanzania, hilo sina mamlaka au uwezo wa kulizungumzia, lakini misingi aliyosimamia Mheshimiwa Dr. Magufuli ilikuwa ni misingi ya haki, misingi ya utaratibu na misingi inayodumisha umoja, upendo na amani katika nchi ya Tanzania. Kama kuna jambo alikukaa vizuri, alilieleza na kulisimamia kwamba liende vizuri kwa maslahi mapana ya wananchi wa Tanzania, walio na kipato cha juu, walio na kipato cha kati, walio na kipato cha chini, wafanyakazi wa sekta zote na ngazi zote, na mpaka wale tunaita mamalishe, kina machinga, nao aliwatengenezea utaratibu wa kuona kwamba kila mmoja anapata haki stahiki kwa mahali ambapo anastahiki kuwepo na kile ambacho anastahiki kukipata.
Sijui swala la maendeleo utalizungumzia lipi haswa sehemu ya Mwanza, manake kama kawaida unajua kwamba maendeleo mwanzo huwa inafika katika labda zile town ambazo ni kuu. Sijui imekuwa kwaje kwa Mwanza, mmeweza kuona maendeleo haya?
Kwa mkoa wa Mwanza kwa kweli tumeona maendeleo makubwa. Makubwa sio tu ya kuelezea, makubwa yanayoonekana. Moja, tulikuwa kwenye ilani ya uchaguzi iliahidi kwamba kuondoa umaskini na kupunguza tatizo la ukosefu wa ajira hasa kwa vijana. Kwa mkoa wa Mwanza tunao vijana wengi, lakini pia wanaojishughulisha na shughuli mbalimbali zikiwemo za ujasiriamali. Kwenye ujasiriamali kumepanuka aina nyingi. Wapo mabodaboda, wapo wa machinga, wako kina mamalishi. Aliwapa na fursa kila watu wakapata sehemu ya kufanyia shughuli bila kubugudhiwa na mtu yoyote katikati ya mji wa jiji la Mwanza. Lakini pia tuliahidi kwamba kwenye huduma za jamii kuna maendeleo makubwa ambayo yamefanyika. Kwa mfano upanuzi wa kiwanja cha ndege, sasa ndege zinatua, umepanuliwa na umekaa katika standard ya kimataifa. Ulikuwa na meli zilisimama zaidi ya miaka 20 na zimetengenezwa na zinafanya kazi kwa huduma Mwanza, Bukoba na kwenye visiwa vinavyozunguka mkoa wa Mwanza. Na tuliahidi kwamba ziko zingine ambazo zinaendelea kutengenezwa na zingine ambazo tayari zinaendelea kufanyika, lakini iko miradi mikubwa, miradi ya maji kwenye barabara, mambo ya umeme yamefanyika, tunayaona na wananchi wanayashuhudia katika maeneo yao, mahali ambako wanaishi na ambako miradi hiyo imepita. Kwa hiyo kwa kweli tumeyashuhudia na kweli tumeumia kuondokewa na mpendo wetu tuliopenda.
Tena niseme pole zangu na pia hongereni kwa maendeleo hayo. Sijui kama uliwahi kukutana naye uso kwa uso?
Kwa kuwa ni kiongozi wangu, ni mwenyekiti wa Chama cha Mapinduzi na rais wa Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania, kukutana uso kwa uso tunakutana naye kama kiongozi.
Alikuwa mtu aina gani labda kwa dakika moja?
Ni mtu mkarimu, ni mtu anayewapenda watu.
Hakuwatia hofu
mwenye huruma na watu.
Hakuwatia hofu kwa staili yake, aswa kama wewe ambaye ni katibu wa mkoa, unajua wakati mwingine unahitajika uwe sambamba kila wakati. Sijui mlikuwa mnaichukuliaje nyinyi hapo?
Waliopata hofu ni wale wasiojiamini na kutekeleza majukumu yale ambayo yalikuwa yameelekezwa kwa mujibu wa katiba ya Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania ama katiba ya Chama cha Mapinduzi. Lakini alikuwa ni mtu mrahimu, mtu mwema sana. Ukikosea anakuambia. Lakini ni mtu ambaye alikuwa ni mtu wa watu mahala pote, na akifika watu kila mmoja anatamani ngalau hata kama amuone, asogee karibu, apate ushauri wake, apate maelekezo.
Wewe kibinafsi ulichukua nini katika uongozi wake, ambapo labda unaweza ukaangalia hili lilikuwa ni somo, na ni somo ambalo nikilitekeleza kibinafsi kwa watu ambao nawaongoza, basi unaweza ukafanya vitu ambavyo vitakuwa ni vikuu sana kwa watu hawa?
Misingi mikubwa aliyoacha kwanza ni ya kuendelea kudumisha umoja, amani na wa nchi yetu kwa maslahi ya wananchi na Watanzania kwa ujumla na mali zao. Lakini la pili ni uwajibikaji kwa kila mmoja. Ni jambo ambalo ametufundisha na ametujengea mazingira mazuri na imeleta heshima sana kwa kila mmoja. Ambaye hana ajira mahala popote, hata kama ni mjasiriamali, kuna falsafa iliyokuwa inatumika kwamba hapa kazi tu, asiyefanya kazi ya asile. Neno hapa kazi tu limetujengea uzalendo na utamaduni kubwa, limetukumbusha mambo mengi sana. Na hili hata nidhamu mahala popote, kazini, ofisini, ilijengwa yani heshima kubwa sana. Kila anayestahili kutoa huduma anatoa huduma. Kwa hiyo haya ambayo ametuachia kweli lazima tuendelee kuyaenzi, kuyaamini kwamba ndio msingi wa maendeleo ya Watanzania.
Kuondoka kwake pigo kuu, tunakubaliana na hilo, lakini angalia kuna kuja na matunda makuu wakati ambapo Afrika Mashariki kwa mara ya kwanza inapata nafasi ya kuongozwa, au nchi hii inapata nafasi ya kuongozwa na kiongozi mwanamke. Sijui wewe unalichukulia hili vipi, na je, una ile confidence kwamba uongozi wa Mama Suluhu utakuwa ni uongozi mkuu na pia utaweza kutekeleza mambo ambayo aliyoanza Rais Magufuli?
Nchi yetu ya Tanzania inaongozwa na katiba ya, kwa hiyo uongozi ndivyo ambavyo unaelekezwa.
Ndio.
Na hatusemi kwamba uongozi wa mwanamke ni kiongozi ambaye katika tibu zote muda Muungano wa Tanzania. Tunayo imani kwa heshima hiyo atayasimamia na kuyaendeleza yote ambayo yalikuwa yamepangwa. Na bahati nzuri mwaka 2015 aliteuliwa kwa makamu wa rais. Wamefanya naye kazi katika mipango hii yote ambayo tunaizungumzia. Wamefanya pamoja na aliyekuwa makamu wa rais ambao sasa ni rais wa Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania. Kwa hiyo hatuna mashaka, hatuna hofu. Yatasimamiwa, yatatekelezwa kwa kiwango kile ama zaidi yale ambayo yalikuwa yamepangwa kufanyika.
Asante sana. Labda kwa mara ya mwisho nikupe nafasi ya kuwazungumzia Watanzania wenzako, wana Mwanza na Jumuiya ya Afrika Mashariki, Afrika kwa jumla na dunia nzima, ambapo wengi wanalia kwa kutokwa na kiongozi ambaye alikuwa ni mkuu sana, kiongozi ambaye alifanya vingi, alitia mikakati mikuu kuhakikisha kwamba nchi yake inakuwa, na hili linatiririka katika dunia nzima kwa jumla, na labda na familia yake pia.
Kubwa nilikuendelea kuomba Watanzania, ndugu na familia, waendelee kuwa watulivu hasa katika kipindi hiki kigumu cha majonzi, kuhakikisha kwamba tunamsindikiza mpendo wetu katika nyumba yake ya milele. Lakini kuendelea kuwaomba Watanzania na wana Mwanza kwa jumla kuendeleza umoja na mshikamano katika mkoa wetu wa Mwanza kwa maslahi ya mapana ya nchi yetu. Ni jambo ambalo limetokea, hatuna uwezo nao, ni mipango ya Mwenyezi Mungu. Tulimpenda sana mheshimiwa, lakini Mwenyezi Mungu amempenda zaidi. Kwa hiyo tuendelee kushikamana umoja wetu, na tukizidi kumuombea mwenzetu ambaye ametangulia mbele za haki. Kwa yale ambayo yalipangwa kwa maeneo yote yataendelea kusimamiwa, kwa sababu serikali ipo, uongozi upo na mamlaka zote zipo kama jinsi ambavyo ziliwekwa kwa mujibu wa taratibu. yataendelea kudumishwa na kuyaenzi yale yote ambayo aliyafanya na yale ambayo alikuwa amekusudia kuyafanya, kwa sababu yalikuwepo kwenye mipango kwa maana ya ilani ya Chama cha Mapinduzi 2025.
Asante sana. Ni kupitia njia ya simu katibu wa CCM.
Rai yangu kubwa ni ndio, karibu tuendelee.
Asante sana. Kupitia njia ya simu katibu wa CCM mkoa wa Mwanza Bwana Julius Peter, asante sana kwa muda wako, na tena nizitume pole zangu, risala za rambirambi kwa Watanzania wote kwa jumla, wakati ambapo tunaadhimisha siku hii tunapomweka mpendwa katika nyumba yake ya milele. Asante sana kwa muda wako na nikutakie siku njema.
Asante na kushukuru pia na wewe.
Shukrani. Secretary CCM Mwanza there, Julius Nantongelia Peter, who joined us earlier on to just